And you thought you were not going to get any Astro Weather. It's funny how life is like that sometimes. Let me just see how we're doing on the old virtual background. We're good. I think we're good to go. Welcome, everybody, all three of you who are here, I guess eight. And we're going to be getting into the Astro Weather for the 24th day of August as we move much more deeply into the sign of Virgo. And it's always interesting uh, being late on a Virgo day. Kind of makes me feel guilty because I'm not representing my Virgoan tribe. Well, as I gather my molecules together here and the forces assemble, let's just talk a little bit. I was knocked out last night, man. I was totally knocked out. I was in bed. I usually try to get to bed somewhere between 10:30 and midnight. That's my stated goal. And I think last night I got to bed at 11:30, and the next thing I know, I wake up and it's 8 o'clock in the morning. Can you believe that shit? Very surprising. You know what's always surprising is when I wake up and I can tell by the quality of the light in my room where I am. Like, uh-oh, it is way too bright. It is way too bright right now. So, anyway, welcome to the show. We're gonna dive in here and dissect the planets. How was that debate last night? Did you guys watch the debate? Apparently, Pluto was not kind to Mike Pence. He came out as one of the losers. I actually spent more time listening to the Trump Tucker interview, which was maybe 25 minutes at the most. And clearly, the winner of the debate last night was Trump because that's a bunch of losers. They're all losers. Vivek is slick. He says all the right things, but he's not trustworthy. But yeah, so Pence with the Pluto effect, the solar Pluto effect, uh, he was harsh. He came out really, really harsh, and he called Vivek a rookie. We don't need to pull somebody off the bench. He kept referring to his experience. And it's a funny thing with Mike Pence. He can tout all the things that they accomplished during Trump's presidency, but there were some serious errors in judgment during that time, and it's going to be interesting to see how much Pence wants to take credit for. Nobody's really gone after Pence yet for his COVID response. And that's where I think he's gonna really possibly crack, right? Because he's wired. He's wired like a coiled spring on a cheap mattress. Anyway, let's get into the weather. Here we go. Sun 1 degree Virgo, and we have Mars here at the 28th degree of Virgo, and it's that crazy degree, right? There's frenzied activity today, and coming into that final exact uh, trine with Pluto. So there's a lot of sort of do or die deadline energy in the air. That's what you're getting. Do or die deadline energy, and I would say get her done. Right tomorrow, Mars begins its ingress into the final degree of Virgo, and I believe that consummates on Saturday. and we have Mars and Libra over the weekend, which is um, which is not great. No, I wouldn't say it's not great. I would say if you're out socializing and you have to or want to throw a party, Mars and Libra could be good. I mean, it could get you fired up to get everything set up and be very active, right? Like Mars and Libra is like super active. So I would say socializing over the weekend could be good with Mars and Libra. Just try not to have too many drinks, um, because you may regret a few actions with Mars and Libra. Watch out for debates. Everybody is in debate mode, heavy debate mode. That's what we're going to get to look for and look towards, forward to with Mars and Libra is the potentially caustic debate. Mars is now moving opposite Neptune. It's moving away from the opposition. It's still in there, and we're still kind of fighting our way through the fog of understanding what's going on and what's happening next, especially when it comes to Hawaii, Lahaina, the news blackout, which I talked about yesterday. Also, everything that's related to the the jibber jabs, the hijacks. We're gonna have to go back to code now because apparently YouTube has raised its standards, has raised its level of critical analysis with misinformation. I was on with Quite Frankly the other night, and he got a show pulled, and he's gone for a week from YouTube. So again, a lot of that is you're going to see a lot of Mars and Libra and people just really uh, being recoiled here with what's potentially happening, and it's going to be interesting. It'll be an interesting Mars and Libra season, that's for damn sure. Mercury, guess what? Our friend Mercury is retrograde. Not a bad thing. I'm never, I'm not somebody who is a doom peddler with Mercury retrograde. I think Mercury retrogrades can be very, very productive. And it's at a point where it's, not in an exact opposition with Neptune, but it is. So I think people need to recalibrate some of the illusions in their life. And I think this is a time where people are starting to count their, I wouldn't call it debt per se, but it's more along the lines of commitments, promises kept, things that they either lived up to or didn't live up to. Usually with Mercury retrograde, it can be a little bit critical, but you can also reassess your position with things, and you can reassess your position with other people and whether or not they've lived up to their end of the bargain or not. So that's actually a really productive. There's a lot of productivity that can take place with Mercury retrograde, especially in Virgo. You can just look at what's not working, and Virgo's got that really analytical um, function that can be just surgical with a Mercury retrograde. And here it's going retrograde in the Tauran decan. So it's not just what's not working, but what's not bringing in money. Where are you not being able to take care of your resources? This is a good Mercury retrograde to trim fat. If you want to go on a diet, if you want to lose weight, uh, great, fantastic Mercury retrograde to do that. It's right in the pocket, as they say, in the music business. And so you have this also Yod with Chiron and Aries, right? So that's an unusual Yod, and will be there for a while. Mercury will go back to like 16. So it's got 5 degrees of retrograde motion, and it's still in relationship with this yacht. And I just have to think that this is related to decisions around personal health. Chiron and Aries is taking a risk. It's like, my body, my choice. And Aries is the body. It is the body proper, right? That's the nature of Aries. my body, my choice. And you have Mercury retrograde coming in, people reassessing their relationship with their body. From what I understand, there are people that are getting ill. And so why are people getting ill? Is it because the jibber jab is um, being activated? And what about the non-jibber jabbers? What about the non-carjackers? Why are they getting ill? Is it because oversaturation, overexposure to the tiny little mRNA factories walking around? Is that what we're looking at? There's a lot of debate around 5G. What happens if 5G gets activated, right? So there's a great deal of possibility and variables as to what might be taking place here. And I wonder if I talked about this yesterday on 15 Minutes of Flame. I wonder if it's a bit of a trap. I wonder if people who are so adamant and really martial about their personal rights and their choice of their body. I'm wondering if they're actually going to have somebody or something more virulent. I mean, it's like it feels to me like it's a bit of a setup, and I'm hoping that that's not the case, right? I'm hoping that it's really just another fear principle. I think this so-called new variant is being called Eris, if I'm not mistaken. I don't have Eris up here, but if I did, it'd be right about there. What's interesting about Eris is its connection, and I know there's a little bit of a different spelling because Eris is a goddess, if that's what you'd like to call Eris, of discordia, right? Things that are uh, they just go wrong. It's a little. Maybe it's the bad niece of Uranus, but that's kind of the idea around Eris is discord, things uh, not unfolding in a way that could be considered organic or harmonic. But the relationship between the word Eris and aerosol, and I know that they're spelled differently, but it's an interesting connection and how we're dealing with aerosol skies and have been for a very long time. So I'm just throwing that out there. We have Venus also retrograde. She goes back to 12, which means that we're almost done with the Venus retrograde action. And I think it's been good, at least on my end. What I've been trying to do is, rebuild some bridges with people that had been either broken or in disrepair. And I think some of those efforts have gone fairly well. So I hope that you've been able to do some of that on your own end. And when Venus goes direct, you could really begin to move forward again with perhaps some broken relationships that have been actually good ones, but just things that may have been said or done out of context that were either misunderstood or not really thought through at a certain level. So, yeah, next week, Venus direct, and we get to mount our horses and rebuild those relationships again. And I hope you've actually also looked at what you love, right? Because Leo are the things that we love and that we're passionate about. And I hope Venus retrograde has gotten you to think about those things. And that if you're ready, willing, and able, and have some courage when it goes direct, launch out on a hobby or a pastime or something that gives you great joy and helps you round out your human experience. Because at the end of the day, we're still humans. We need those things. We need things that give us pleasure and joy and takes us away from the world. That's an important part of our experience here. We're not one or two dimensional or even three dimensional. We're multidimensional beings. So having things that remind us that we're more than who we are is very important. And we've got the squares going on today. The square with Jupiter is most prominent, and I think that there could be also in your life or in your end somebody that comes back in and wants to rebuild with you, right? And usually, what I see this with the Jupiter square, Sometimes it has to deal with money and resources. So I would say there's a bit of a caveat here with Venus retrograde. So if somebody wants to come back into your life and make good, and then they attach a monetary value, or I would say be aware of that, right? Be aware of that. And if you have anything unspoken between two people, especially as it relates to debt, I would say pay attention to that. Square that away. And this could be a really good part of the Venus retrograde experience. And I would say that Venus is probably a bit more in square with Jupiter than it is Uranus, although the Uranian part could be very good in resolving things quickly. Um, Conversely, Venus is in this trine area with Chiron, and it will be, right? So it goes back to 12, still in a wide trine, then it moves forward, still in a wide trine. And again, I think that that's nothing but good for relationships. You being able to admit that you were wrong, or being able to admit that maybe how you handled a situation may have been forceful, or over the top. And this is really a good time for settling those debts, right? Settling those um, monetary debts, and there's a word that I'm interpersonal debts. That's the word I was looking for. Thank you. Interpersonal debts. Let's see. What do we got here? I think Mercury in this position going retrograde is actually good. Like as I mentioned before, yeah, I think it. If it had gone retrograde exactly opposite Neptune, I think we'd be in for a bit more of a rough ride with Mercury, right? But still, we're trying to put our high beams on and cut through the fog, and that fog is the fog of disinformation, the fog of propaganda. That's all. That's what Neptune represents here. It's the great fog bank. The moon is in Sagittarius, and it's an interesting contrast with the sun today, and actually a really good lead into our star of the day. And it brings us to the one T square that we have, which is the moon, Saturn, and the sun, right? So the moon in Sagittarius wants to express itself authentically. That's what we do with the moon in Sagittarius. You're literally living your emotional truth. It's an exuberant moon. I like the moon in Sagittarius. It's people who have it are doing their best to express their their um, their authenticity through how they feel. Sometimes it can be a little overzealous and a little over the top. So we have a safeguard today with that Moon Saturn square. And to me, the Moon Saturn square also feels a little bit like longing, like not wanting to feel boxed in. If you can get away this way, and I know a lot of people are waiting for next weekend with a big weekend. I think it's probably better if you get away this weekend. You'll beat the crowds and try to break out of the doldrums, right? That's the Moon Saturn square. You're trying to break out, break free, break through, break free. And because there's a little bit of a fog of depression here, right? When you get into this Moon Saturn square. Now, by the end of the day, that moon will move on a little bit, right? So it's really just a kind of a momentary condition for those of you here in the Northern Hemisphere, and in mostly the United States, North America, to some extent South America. If you're in another part of the world, I think there would be a temptation to have that second or third or that fourth libation, right? Because that's what Sagittarius is noted for, and it's like an escape hatch here. And I would say that there's I'm not going to judge anybody for doing something like that. Trust me. With my past, I have no right to judge anybody. But I would also look at perhaps other ways of dealing with your doldrums and your dissatisfaction, and that would be this moon trine to Neptune, which again I think is much more meditative, more contemplative. Looking at if you can get out in nature, right? Sagittarius loves nature, and connecting with nature through the moon, trining Neptune. That would be really good antidote. Like, so if you are just feeling stuck and down, and you want to just get out of this place, try to just get out in nature a little bit. go to a park. If you have like a river or lake or a pond or whatever, because the moon is very connected to water. If you have one of those in your vicinity in your area, avail yourself of it. It could replace and displace perhaps being caught in this I feel stuck, nothing is going anywhere energy and vibe. There's always the next day, right? There's always, you know what? You haven't even seen any of this. This is, man, you haven't even seen any of this. Is what happens when you fucking wake up late in the day. Here we go. Let's just recap here really quickly. Um, here's your here's your Venus square Jupiter, which I talked about extensively, right? Here's the T square that I was just talking about. Moon square Sun, Moon squares Neptune, and then there's that trine. Moon square Saturn, there's that trine with Neptune. And then, what I was talking about earlier with Mars and Mercury and the oppositional energy. So this is actually a really good day if you can navigate some of the hard angles, right? And this is also Venus square Jupiter. Watch out for people who want to reinsert themselves in your lives based on money or what they can get out of that interpersonal transaction. I think we've covered most of this, right? And then there's that Mars at 28. You're on a deadline. You're on a deadline. Get things done. Get things done if you can do it. You're on a deadline. So there you go. There's the astro weather. Not a lot of water in the sky. I think Saturn in Pisces. I think Saturn in Pisces is kind of droughty. Am I right? Like water is just hard to come by with Saturn in Pisces. So hopefully that'll break a little bit. Um, maybe when Saturn goes direct in November, we'll have a deluge. We'll have snowstorms and ice pack for ages. Well, hopefully not. But I think that's the lesson here in Saturn and Pisces. Water is just hard to come by. All right, let's get into the star of the day. Thanks for just watching me while I talked. And now you've got the chart. You can have some visuals. All right, so let's do this. And today's star of the day is somebody who I think is one of the most talented and funny people I've ever had a chance to watch and witness, and very controversial in a number of different ways. And today's star of the day is Dave Chappelle. And this is, I think he's on Oprah's chair here. If you haven't seen Dave on Oprah's couch, I highly recommend it. Um, what really struck me about Chappelle's chart is his 12th house and how private he is. And as I was kind of cruising around the internet last night, they talk about how private he is. Like like being in the public eye must be really, really difficult for Dave Chappelle. And you can see here that by the time you get to his ascendant, right? Do I have this right? Oh man, you know what? I didn't even have the fucking day right. That's what happens when you do this shit. Pardon me. Let me get rid of this because I didn't realize it's not. It's still the same thing. Give me 1 second here. It's not really the same thing, but he has a son in the 12th house. Hold on. Let me go back. Mr. Chappelle, calling Mr. Chappelle. Calling Mr. Chappelle. Here we go. All right. Dave Chappelle. Let's bring him back up here. Da, 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 da. Let's see. Let's do that. Okay. And then let's just type in some digits. See, I'm not so awake or asleep that I didn't notice that that's not his chart. So let's do this. And my apologies. Mi apologia. All right. Mea culpa. I'm like, that's not his fucking chart. Okay. There we go. And let's see. Washington, D.C. I'm just going to fire up the chart. You know what he looks like. The famous face of Dave Chappelle. Bum. All right. Uno momentito. Thanks for your patience here. Let's just go in here. This is his chart. We're just going straight off of astro.com. And there's a sun in the 12th house, right? This is how private Dave Chappelle is. Right there. Sun in the 12th house. Virgo rising. I think that his public persona, you know what's also really interesting is like the star pattern. I mean, if you take into account the odds, you know, Dave Chappelle literally is a star, right? It looks like the Chrysler symbol. So he's got Saturn and the moon. So the mother and the father play a huge role in Dave Chappelle's life, obviously. And I think, you know, Saturn was too much of a burden for Chappelle in some ways. You know, when he bugged out, when he went to Africa, um, I think he stepped away from Saturn and went to the moon, right? So in his mind, Africa is like the motherland. By the way, just recently, he's talked about moving to Ghana, right? So there's a chance that Dave Chappelle will actually leave the United States and live in Ghana. And, you know, I can see that the moon would represent for him something like the motherland, right? In the 10th house and going back to theoretically, you know, his roots, right? But he bugged out, you know, having somebody who is a 12th house person who has a significant amount of success, I think it's very difficult for them. And of course, he's funny. He's got Mercury and Leo. He's kind of a court jester. Um, and he sextiles Uranus. So he'll say things that are shocking, right? And Pluto, this is, I think, a real tell for Dave Chappelle, is with Pluto on his ascendant, he has to go through Phoenix like moments, you know, where he literally will burn everything down. And that's exactly what happened in April of 2005 when he walked away from the big contract in the Comedy Central deal. And he has this yod with Mars in his 8th house. And it's not like he had hidden enemies with Mars in the 12th, but that's what he was talking about. You know, he was talking about being gaslit and people were you know, telling him to do one thing, then do another thing, and it was as if he was being set up, right? Like they were going to wrest control from Chappelle with the show. It was very, very in his mind, very insidious, right? Very, very insidious. And even with Saturn, with the odd here with Neptune and Jupiter, I think this is a mark of really instability, right? Like Saturn is the anchor, and Mars is what motivates you and drives you, and they're not, you know, connected with other planets. They are, right? You know, there's a very ambitious side to Dave Chappelle, you know, with the Mars sextile to Saturn, the Sun sextile to Saturn. So, yeah, he wants to get to the top. He wants to be, you know, the guy, right? But there in the back end, there's always something that is, you know, kind of in the program, in the mix that makes it hard to reconcile. One of which I think is relationships, right? And with Venus Pluto. Now he's a ride or die guy with Venus Pluto in his first house. But I think he would also have a significant amount of temptation to deal with, and also dealing with things like his sex drive, with Mars in the 8th house, hidden and occulted from the rest of us. Um, I would say of all the planets in this chart, Mars is the one that maybe might be the most afflicted with the square to Jupiter, wanting more, wanting more, wanting more, and then getting more. And then now Mars has the odd, right, with Neptune and then Pluto back here and Venus. And who can he trust? You can kind of see all this play out in this chart. He's a, what's that square to Neptune? So that's a, let's see, that's a moon square to Neptune. So I think Dave is a little unstable, right? And what is that? Hold on. Moon square Uranus, and then where's the Neptune square? That's the sun. So he's got these squares, a sun Neptune square and moon Uranus square. The moon Uranus square is erratic, right? We've seen that. And then the sun Neptune square, I think Dave Chappelle, even though he um, acts with a great deal of confidence, I think sometimes he really doubts himself. There's a lot of self-doubt here. Um, the other thing about Chappelle is that there are people who think that he's not the same guy. And it's interesting because he has Gemini on his midheaven. And I think you would probably have that kind of discussion about him, his professional career, professional arc. So yeah, Dave Chappelle. Interesting character. I had a chart set up for what happened in 2005 when he had the bug out. And maybe if I have time tomorrow, although man, my schedule is so crazy right now, I might revisit this, or I might even do a separate video on what happened during that time when he left Comedy Central. There were some interesting things. Anyway, thanks for being here. Thanks for putting up with my being a bit tardy and having to kind of re-rack the Chappelle chart. But at least I noticed, right? At least I noticed. Anyway, thanks for being here. Obviously, we're behind schedule, which means that 15 minutes of flame won't happen until later this morning. So I'm just giving you a shout out for that, or shout out to let you know about that. We're about 20 minutes out, I would say, from the show. So around 9:30, everything's just a little bit behind schedule today. So I apologize for that. But tomorrow on this channel, I'm going to have a guest who is living in Lahaina. His name is Daniel Aaron. He's an astrologer as well. And he's going to be on here for about an hour. So look forward to that. I've been doing some legwork, trying to put together some pieces for what's happening and what's on the ground in Lahaina. And hopefully we'll have some interesting things to share. Okay. All right. That's it for today. Use your head in order to discern what's real, your heart to set what's possible. Thank you for your patience and your forbearance. And have yourself a great day. Bye for now.